Hi, welcome to Heartfelt Cafe by the Redemptress Media Center. I'm your host, Dennis.
And I'm Bertala. Here we have heartfelt conversations based on solid rock of faith over a cup of coffee.
And today we're going to talk on an important topic, interreligious marriage. Is it permitted, possible, or perilous? Let's discuss.
And here to talk with us, we have Father Sandeep Mazes, the Assistant Director of RMC YouTube channel.
And we have Father Juventus Andrade, also known as Juvie, who is the Rector of Mount St. Alphonsus. Welcome, Father.
Thank you.
And hey Dennis, what are your expectations in an ideal woman?
So when it came to dating, I had my own list of expectations. Like, a funny, beautiful, outgoing, fancy girl. So a mix of Mother Teresa and Margot Robbie. But then I realized God doesn't want a perfect girl, but He wants a woman who will take me to heaven.
Wow.
That's nice.
So what are your expectations?
My expectations, as of now, are just that I'm an adventurous person. So I like to travel, and I expect that other person to like to travel as well. And apart from that, they should be outgoing, obviously, and they should definitely. I mean, if they are of my own, as we're talking about interfaith, right? So if they are of my faith, then that's well and good. If they are interfaith, they should accept my faith, so or at least let me, go on with my faith and not, put any barricades or obstructions to that. And apart from that, just a person who would keep me happy. That's it.
Well,
Father, I know of a happily married interfaith couple who happen to be my friend's parents themselves, and they've been married for the past 22 years so far, and surely I can tell that their faith has not been diluted of any cost, and including their children, they also have been growing in faith, and they've been strong. They've been much more faithful than most of the children I know whose both parents happen to be Catholics.
Okay. 22 years, isn't
Yes.
it? Oh, again. And how do they express their faith?
When it comes to celebrating festivals, the mom happens to be a Christian, so they go to the masses, and they invite priests to their houses, and they celebrate it in a very faithful way. And when it comes to Christmas as such, they do spend a lot of time in church. And similarly, when it comes to the Hindu festivals, the dad is a Hindu, so when it comes to Hindu festivals, they do celebrate it as well, but in the way that's religious to their father as well.
Okay.
So they equally share their religion in the family, and they have the common bar of faith on both religions.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
on the contrary to that, I have a lot of examples. The one recent wedding that I went to was in the month of June. So young couples of different faith, one's Catholic and the other one's of different faith. So they were agreed on terms that both would go to church and also participate in the other faith activities of the other person. But 2 months down the line, the person was not permitted to even attend mass or can't read the Bible in their homes. So this is one of the examples. So people often say love is blind, but in reality, when after marriage, often love seems to get its eyesight back. Yeah.
I mean, that would be your opinion towards it. Father, how would you like to express on that?
Well, thank you for sharing those valid experiences, both of a happily functional marriage between people of two different faiths and one which is not going so smoothly at present. I think before we go into whether or not we should encourage this in the church, I think it's important to reflect on why this is happening and what kind of society we live in. Now, we have, I would say, the blessing of living in a pluralistic society in India where Christians or Catholics get to rub shoulders with people of different religions and cultural backgrounds, and I think that diversity is a richness. It's also very safe to say that because our society is so diverse, you might have some level of protectiveness within your family where you can emphasize the values of the Catholic Church and of the Christian faith. But then you have to go to school, you have to go to work, and there young people are rubbing shoulders, so to speak, with people of other faiths, and you're working on projects, you're celebrating wins together for the team, and you're working on common projects, and some very meaningful friendships develop. And those friendships are built not on faith per se, but a shared humanity, right? And that is a beautiful thing, right? That you can relate to people even though you don't share the same faith is a sign that the same God has created all of us. You know, we all have the same hardware, even if the software is different, right? And that's what helps us to connect with each other. And that humanity is something special. But then, if we value our faith, which we should, there is a hierarchy of values that we need to take into consideration, especially for Catholic young people discerning marriage. Neither of the two of you are married, I suppose, right? And you've been maybe thinking about it, dreaming about it sometimes, and fantasizing about the ideal life partner, right? So sometimes love just happens and you can't put it into a mold, right? And I think that is what we are seeing in society, that because young people have this opportunity to relate with each other across their communitarian boundaries, there is this gravitation towards falling in love, so to speak. But like Dennis said, love is blind, but marriage is a huge eye-opener, right? And that's what we'd like to explore today is this phenomenon that we are seeing in society of young people marrying across religious lines, interfaith marriages, whether it is permissible, whether it's possible to have a successful marriage like that, and whether it's permitted by the church. So the first thing maybe we'll start with is the last one. Is it permitted? So maybe Father Juvie could share a little bit about what the church's perspective is on this.
You just said love just happens. Or as somebody said, some people watch things happen, some people make things happen, and some people just don't know what's happening. And therefore, because this is something so serious, we need to know what's happening in this interaction so that we are able in a better way to make an informed, prayerful, discerned choice.
Father, you said love just happens, but the Bible in 2 Corinthians 6:14 says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Also it says that can two people walk together if they're not walking in the same direction in Amos 3:3.
Mm-hmm.
So how can love just happen?
Well, it does, you know, especially when you think about love as a feeling, or a calling to go out of yourself to someone else. Usually, I agree with you if you're saying that love is something deeper than feelings. But what I think most of us, when we are young, we think about love, we think about those romantic feelings, someone who fascinates you and you fantasize about when they are away, and you're longing for them, you're longing for their presence, you're longing to hear their voice, and something about their personality and sometimes their character, it just draws you out of yourself, right? And that kind of a feeling is what the movies sell, right? And so that's, you know, you mentioned your ideal love of your life, right? So when we think about it, those criteria for falling in love are quite superficial, right? How the girl looks, how the boy talks, how charming he may be, how humorous he or she may be. And so these are qualities that are only at the surface. But when we talk about faith, we talk about spirituality, we talk about expectations of marriage, it's a little deeper than that. And I would agree with you that scripture does warn believers against blindly marrying for the sake of this kind of a love, right? I would take that back from the passage that you just quoted. But we have to understand scripture in context as well, because the same St. Paul who says here that do not be yoked with unbelievers, and it is in the context of marriage, we must understand that in this second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, he's addressing a Christian community that is becoming worldly. And also because they are losing their faith, they are also thinking that all paths are the same. And they are also engaging in idolatrous worship. And so St. Paul is not against marrying a person outside the faith. And I can say that with great confidence, because if you read a few other passages, he is very clear. In 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 9 onwards, he writes, I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with immoral people, not at all meaning the immoral of this world, or the greedy and the robbers or idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world. And so St. Paul is saying that if you have to live only in a Christian ghetto, you will have to literally go outside the world. And then in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, which is again in the context of sexuality and marriage, St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7 verses 16, wife, addressing a Christian wife, how do you know whether you will save your husband of another faith? Husband, how do you know whether you will save your wife, right, of another faith? Again, St. Paul is indicating in his writings that in the early church itself, many believing baptized Christians used to marry outside the faith, and they from the earliest times were doing their best to preserve their faith while being in relation to people in the outside world, including through marriage. And so we must quote scripture within context in order to understand. So maybe here St. Paul is cautioning against a believing Christian marrying someone who has absolutely no faith, a materialist, you can say, whose only value in life perhaps is wealth and fame and influence, and that would not benefit a Christian believer in marriage.
And to add to that, sometimes values that would be contrary to your Catholic faith, and therefore put further strains on the relationship in marriage.
Yeah.
So, Father, does the church permit interfaith marriages?
To answer your question, Batila, let's rewind the clock a little bit to before the Vatican Council, where, the church was very hard and fast, and those people who belong to that generation will know that there was a certain level of fear and trembling if they, had some feelings for a person who was outside the faith. And if you did approach the church, you might get a scolding from your parish priest, And so I've encountered some families in which, maybe the grandmother or the mother of the family has, because they took that step to marry someone outside the faith, they had to elope, they had to run away, they had to, they couldn't approach the church for fear of being judged, and so they would hidingly marry outside the faith, and then they wouldn't be seen in church ever again, maybe for 50 years, for 60 years. And so over time, in the pastoral wisdom of the church, in the year 1965, the church affirmed that everyone has freedom of conscience, and so to respect that people should be respected for who they are, whether they belong to our faith or to another faith, all have the same dignity and the freedom of conscience. And another thing that happened was in 1970, Pope Paul VI wrote a document called Matrimonium Mixta, in which the present law of the church with regards to marriage was laid down, and that entered into the code of Canon Law, which is the law of the church today, in which there are three categories of marriage in the church. right? The first is a Catholic marrying a Catholic. Both of them are baptized in the Catholic Church. Both of them have the fullness of the Catholic faith, and by virtue of their baptism, they can give each other a sacrament. A sacrament is what? An external sign of an inward grace, and that inward grace is nothing but Christ himself, right? And so only someone who belongs to Christ can give Christ to others, and so that's what we call as a sacramental marriage, a marriage between a Catholic and a Catholic. The next level is a mixed marriage, right? A mixed marriage is a Catholic who is born and brought up and baptized in the Catholic Church, and who chooses to marry someone who is a Christian but not a Catholic. There is a difference, you know that, right? And so in a way, the church has been divided spiritually ever since the time of the Protestant Reformation, and then the schism of the Eastern Church and the Western Church that resulted in the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. So a Catholic who chooses to marry a Christian of another denomination enters into what the church calls a mixed marriage, and that is permissible, right? But of course with certain conditions. And then you have another form which is called the disparity of cult, and that is what we would call an interfaith marriage, where a Catholic chooses to marry someone who does not profess Catholic faith or Christian faith, but some other faith or no faith at all. So that would count as a disparity of cult marriage. So all these have procedures to be followed. So in a mixed marriage, of course, you have to both of you share the Christian faith, but you might suffer from the divisions that the churches have among themselves, doctrinally or practically speaking, in the living out of the faith. And so the divisions that are there in the churches will play a role in the divisions of the marriage as well, right? And with regards to an interfaith marriage, there would be even more differences with regards to spirituality and faith and worldview. So it's not that it's impossible in the church today, it's not that it's encouraged either, I must say that, because the church always has a pastoral heart, and what she tries to do is to prioritize the faith, the value of the Christian faith, to respecting the conscience of every individual, and finally always having a caring, shepherding heart for the flock. Not like in the pre-70s times where you were a pariah in the community if you chose to marry outside the faith. So the church has made doors and windows for her faithful to be able to have more flexibility.
I think what Father Sandeep has done is to lay out different possibilities of marriage, and that helps us to get clarity. Here we are not, through this program, trying to promote interfaith marriages. We are seeing it as a reality to which we must respond with pastoral charity. I think that is important. This also brings me to a disclaimer. This is a conversation that we are having on a topic that is so important for us. And it is merely to enlighten us on different aspects of the teaching of the church, not to justify one position over the other or to use it as an argument point, but it is to lay how, given the circumstances where people have experienced love and in a way have weighed it, reflected and discerned, how do you make something beautiful of it? And therefore, important are conversations, honest conversations that must be made and not left till after the marriage is signed and sealed. And then hopefully that this conversation that we are having will be so understood, but you must individually pursue this with your respective parish priest or in the diocese where you live. These are merely throwing a little light on some of the areas that need reflection. Now, I'd like to take it further from what you spoke about, especially interfaith marriages, because there are two people of different faiths who come together. And the church does not call that, rightly as you pointed, as a sacrament, because it's between two baptized persons, but rather it is a nuptial rite. The formula is more or less the same, but more important, the understanding of marriage is the same. The expectations about unity, fidelity, openness to life, permanence, it's all part, whether you call it a sacrament or whether you call it a rite. And it's important for us to understand this. And the church also believes and therefore insists that if you undergo this rite of nuptials, it is valid both in the eyes of the church and in the eyes of the law. And therefore there is no need for any other religious rite or ritual. Despite that, some people do take this forward, maybe because of the compulsions of within the family or the culture, and when they have their faith. So it's important for us to understand what is happening in this. I want to say one thing about the Catholic rite. It's codified, it's definite, it's clear, we know what it says, and it does not depend on me or for Sandeep to change it as we wish. That's the codified law of the church, the distilled wisdom of the ages, so that this marriage, which will soon be blessed, will be based on a sound and a solid foundation. Now, a person of another faith who enters into this nuptial rite is in no way obliged or forced to convert to the Catholic faith. Perhaps that person, by the example of their Catholic partner or seeing the beauty of the faith, might make a voluntary choice, and that is fine. But there is no force or compulsion on the part of the church. Now, that cannot be said of some other religious faiths or other religious rituals, because some of the rituals in other faiths are not codified. They are different in different traditions, depending on a particular culture or society within that very faith. Now, while some might be merely an exchange of vows, others involve something more serious. That is, by participating in a particular religious rite, it is presumed either directly or implicitly that you are converted to that faith.
That's what Christians have to be aware of.
Yeah. And so, if this is what we are going through, the question one must ask, by participating in another rite which will demand or presume that I am therefore automatically converted to that faith, is something that you must be aware of. Because on the part of the Catholic Church, you are allowed to retain your faith even though you participate in that rite. And I think that's the point that we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, picking up from that point, I think it's important for our young audience to also know that the permission of the church is not assumed. Right? There are procedures to follow. So a lot of Catholics lose their standing with the community when they take matters into their own hands and marry outside the faith without following due procedure. So if you have the intention to marry someone outside the faith, don't be scared to approach your parish priest and say that that's your intention. Can you help me out? And they might ask you, why are you doing it? And they might ask you some important questions to ensure that you are making an informed, mature, and well thought out and prayed out decision. Maybe even to discourage you sometimes. But at the end of the day, they can't. If you say, I want to marry this person, they have to bless that, right? So they will help you with procedures with regards to applying to the bishop for the dispensation to marry outside the Catholic faith. And when the bishop does give you that permission, he does it on the basis of some conditions. That the Catholic party promises to do all in his or her power to preserve their Catholic faith and to hand over that Catholic faith to the children that would arise from the marriage. And the non-Catholic party must be informed of this promise. Okay, so these are the essential, and if you follow this procedure, you retain your Catholic faith, you retain your standing in the community, and you can receive communion when you come from Mass. Whereas if you take it into your own hands and you elope, then you are in a way excommunicating yourself. And that means you're extracting yourself from communion with the church by taking matters into your own hands. So for our online audience who might be watching, as Father said, this is a disclaimer. We are not either saying, oh, because Father Sandeep or because Father Juvi said this, that's why I'm marrying someone outside the faith, or that's why I am never going to get married to a person outside the faith. Each and every case requires pastoral accompaniment with your parish priest and with your family members and whoever has concern for your life.
And just to cement that, a wedding is meant to be a joyful celebration. A time where we're going to be. And so we need to look at whatever we can, both on the part of the couple, but also the accompanying ministers in the church, to understand where the couples are coming from. How do we accompany them so that what they have found in each other as true love is signed and sealed and blessed with God's grace through the nuptial rite.
So, Father, as a number of people have been eloping or keeping their relationships and marriages in secrecy, is mostly because they aren't much aware if the church actually permits it, or if it is actually possible to have an interfaith marriage happening. But then now the conversation we just had brings out a lot of information that the church does permit in interfaith marriages, and therefore they don't have to do anything out of the church. They could always bring it to the notice of the church and do it in the church in itself.
That's so true. But a bit of a disclaimer here is that from parish to parish, which is the reality, you will get pastors on different wavelengths, right? And so you're not going to go to your parish priest and just say, Father, I want to marry so and so, and that's that. There is a bit of humility, apologeticness that you have to you have to go with an apologetic style to your parish priest, because there is a serious concern about preserving one's faith. For us Christians, Christ means the world to us, and Christians have given up their lives even rather than recant their faith. And when we take this decision to marry a person of another faith very lightly, we are not showing a very deep Catholic faith, and so no one, I think, should take the decision to marry a person of another faith lightly. We'll probably explore why in the course of this conversation.
True. This year my friend got married to a person of other faith. She didn't want to inform her parish clergy, just so she was afraid of what their judgments would be. So probably if she was aware of this, she would have approached her pastor. So Father, so what you're saying is the church permits, but it doesn't encourage.
Yes, if you take it to mean that permission is out of a heart of love and pastoral concern for her children, there are many things that your parents may not be pleased about when you do something that is contrary to their wish, but sometimes they'll just support you because you are their child, right? So when we think about it that way, the church as a true mother loves her children, and when a pastor with a maternal heart, as Pope Francis used to say, approaches this reality in India with the idea that this Catholic person has taken the courage to come and tell me because he or she feels like he or she belongs to this family of faith. So I cannot reject this person. I might have reservations about this person's choice, but I cannot replace that person's conscience. I cannot replace that person's choice as a pastor. I can do all in my power to dissuade them, to kind of show them, okay, there are these consequences that could happen. I'd like to share a few varying examples. You mentioned about your friend who ran away and eloped because she felt that she couldn't approach the church. And then you have also many others like your friend who is in good standing in the community and they can practice. They've got a nice understanding. But I want to bring to your notice and to the notice of all young people who might be watching this later on is that marriage is something that affects the rest of your life, and not just your life but also the life of your family. Both the families of origin and the family that you're going to create with your spouse. And I have in my pastoral experience met with different kinds of situations. I've met with an interreligious or an interfaith marriage where the couple are very happily married, such wonderful human beings. Wife happens to be a Catholic, the husband happens to be a Hindu, but what a wonderful Hindu man he is. He knows the Vatican documents and he can quote them because of his love for his wife, and he respected her decision to bring up the children to be baptized and all of that, and for all intents and purposes they're a very happy, well-knit marriage. The cousins also blend very well even though they come from different traditions. And so I've seen with my eyes that an interreligious or an interfaith marriage can work. At the flip side of it, I've also seen like couples who have been married for, let's say, 10 years interreligious, and then some political rhetoric that comes up in the news shapes the person of the other faith so deeply that he begins to see that this spouse of his, whom he's been married to for 10 years and they've been having such a wonderful relationship up to then, because of this political messaging that he's getting from the media, he starts to see her as his worst enemy, and he starts to abuse her and to ill-treat her, all because he sees in her the other. You see, and then you have also other situations. In your case, there was a family that they've come to a kind of compromise and which works for them. But then I've seen other families where there's a tug of war virtually every day. I've got my puja corner, you've got your altar, and there's a tug of war for the children. Like the mother wants to get the children to the church, but the husband doesn't approve of it. Okay, if the Catholic party is strong, maybe he or she can bully the person to get her way done, but then that's not a happy marriage, right? It's like one person winning and another person losing, and for the children, it's a confusing thing. No child wants to choose between mommy and daddy. And if the mom and the dad are at loggerheads about faith, what values are they going to pick up, there are, it's not something I would say that you should jump into, like with the thought that all that I need is strong feelings of love and we can fight everything together, because those strong feelings very quickly fade away, and what remains is really commitment. Father was mentioning some time ago a few words about the qualities that Catholics expect in marriage. I don't know whether you do you have any idea what are the qualities? You mentioned at the start of the conversation that you had some qualities, like you mentioned that you wanted someone who travels, and you mentioned someone who looks like Margot Robbie but has the character of Mother Teresa. So do you know the two qualities that are necessarily intended by the couple, without which the church cannot bless? Or a Catholic or a person of another faith, there are two essential intentions you must have while coming into marriage, without which the church will not bless your marriage. Free will is definitely one thing, but that's not what I have in mind. But these are qualities of marriage, which is good but not an essential quality.
Both are of the opposite sex.
That's all. That's an essential quality for sure. But that's not what I'm looking for. One is the unity, the unitive and the procreative intention. That you must choose to bind yourselves to each other for a lifelong union. It's not like for 10 years, for 15 years, for 25 years, as long as the children are with us. No, it's a lifelong bond that binds the husband and wife together, the unitive purpose. And it is love, basically. So when they come to the parish office, I say, do you love her? Do you love him? Oh yes, Father, we love. And then you must want to have children. I know that I had this case where there was this young man, Catholic man, he didn't come to the office, but he gave me a phone call. He said, I'm a Catholic, etc. I want to get married to this person of another faith. And he was saying, Father, we don't think we will have children, but is it possible for us to have the wedding in the church? I said, I'm sorry, son, but if your intention is to exclude children, then I cannot bless your marriage in the church. You see? So Father also mentioned about unity and procreation. It is a lifelong bond. It is unbreakable. One of our professors in the seminary narrated an instance where he was guiding a couple, an interfaith couple, into marriage. It was a Catholic girl and a person of another faith, the boy. And he was very into the girl and they were very much interested in each other. And one day when that priest and that boy were going up the lift, they just got into a conversation about what they intend by marriage in the Catholic Church. And Father happened to mention that in the Catholic Church we don't believe in divorce. And the boy had second thoughts when he heard that. If we don't believe in divorce, then there's no exit option for me. And so he was dissuaded by that very fact, So when you come from a different faith tradition, you come with different convictions and a worldview. Even your convictions of marriage are shaped by your faith tradition. So, like I said, it's like you said also very beautifully, the church permits but doesn't encourage, and for very valid reasons, practical reasons.
I'd like to take up from what you've been conversing about, because we've talked about success stories, struggles that have gone, definitions of what you understand. I'd like to put it in a kind of a paradigm, because the two of them are becoming one, but what is that understanding of marriage? And into that we have, I would like to call them 4 different kinds of factors that come. While they might apply to all marriages, the final element is pertaining to interfaith marriages. The first is the personal dimension, because all of us come to any relationship, and especially marriage, with both our lights and our shadows, our strengths and our weaknesses. And so it's important to realize that not only true of ourselves, but true of the other. Sometimes you say, I know that that's a problem, but once I get in marriage, I will settle him. I will. You don't get into marriage for therapy, okay? But you need to have an honest understanding of both one's lights and shadows, the strengths, and do something about it, to acknowledge it. The second is the interpersonal dimension, because how do you relate? How you are shaped by the family that you grow up in. Somebody jokingly said, if you want to know what your spouse is going to look like 10 years from now, just look at her mother or look at his father. Because quite often, unless you decide to tear the script, because for better or for worse, they could be wonderful role models or perhaps things that you need to rethink. The third is the cultural factor, because again, even if you come from the same faith but different cultures, you might use the same words but mean and intend something else. And so with all these 3, as I said, there can be personal strains even within a Catholic marriage. Now to the 4th one, which we have, is the interfaith. So that's on the level of the faith marriage. That is why the church says, if you're entering into it because you really believe, do so with caution, because you need to be aware of certain factors that can put a greater strain on that relationship in marriage. And let me speak about, like you might say, okay, both of them, although they have belonged to different faiths, are very religious people, they attend their religious rituals respectively. But our faith is more than just rituals. It is also our belief system, our worldview, How do we see God? Is there life after death? Is there resurrection? Or is there another way of looking at life? Is there forgiveness? Is there equality and dignity of both? Not a male domination or a female superiority, but both of them are created in God's image and likeness. And that respect and that dignity must come into marriage, and quite often this can be shaped by cultural factors and sometimes by religious worldviews. And that's why if these religious worldviews are at odds with each other, they put a further strain on that relationship in marriage. Because this is something significant that we need to keep in mind. If our marriage, of your marriage that you enter into, is either going to be strengthened or threatened because of these factors that are not sufficiently paid attention to. That's why when the church as a mother is concerned, as you said, it permits but does not encourage, is because it does not want her children therefore to lose out on something that would cause so much of strain in what is normal circumstances, two people coming from two different worlds. Because you might see everything as rosy-eyed and you're on cloud 9, and then after a few months you come down to earth. So therefore you're asked, how do you look at all these different factors that I just highlighted? The personal, the interpersonal, the cultural, and the religious, which is really about the worldview more than just religious practices.
Father, as you said, there are many challenges in marrying a person from another faith. But aren't there equal amount of challenges in marrying within the same faith as well? Because I know a particular family where the wife in that relationship was of a different denomination, and she used to spend the most of her day praying and in worship, whereas the other partner was a Catholic and would just set a certain period of time for family prayer and would be satisfied with that particular amount of time. So he had a lot of problems that the wife was spending too much time praying, and as time went by, the prayerfulness of that wife faded away, because she had this particular thought in mind that her prayerfulness shouldn't be a burden on the partner. So doesn't that also come up as a challenge within marrying within the same faith as well?
Yeah, you're bringing up a very important point, Bertila, that it isn't just as much as we caution against taking a decision to marry outside the faith lightly, even within the faith, if you consider that our separated brethren also belong to us, they are Christians, they have the grace of baptism, they have the grace of Christian faith, or even a person of the same faith, the Catholic faith, which is a tragedy. We've seen in our pastoral ministry that there are Catholic marriages, sacramental marriages on the surface of it, where the couple gets married today and then in a matter of 4 weeks, few months, 1 or 2 years, the whole marriage breaks down and they apply for annulment. Which tells me that just being born Catholic doesn't automatically mean that you have internalized the values of the faith. And that is where the parents, I think, come quite strongly into the fray. How much of investment the parents have made in your formation as a Catholic, not just your knowledge of the faith and the moral teachings of the church, but also your personality and your character. Sometimes parents today delegate that job to the school or to the parish, thinking that they will take care. But that is not the fact. In fact, the catechism tells us that the parents are the first formators, right? And so that would be the reason behind what you're saying. But what you're bringing out is also another important fact, is that even though you might come, in your case it was a person of another denomination, but you can have two Catholics marrying one has a devotion to Mother of Perpetual Help and another has a devotion to Saint Anthony. Who wins? You know? Or you have a similar kind of difference of opinion where, you know, you're praying too much, you're too religious, you know. So perhaps when you're in the courtship period, or in India we have arranged marriages, at least nowadays I hope that families give the young people a little more freedom to say no if they feel that the one proposed to them in marriage in the arranged system, if they are free to say no, I'll be very happy. But unfortunately, that is also a reality in India, that many young people are forced into marriage just because they've attained the correct age, or the parents feel that the girl is going to be a danger to herself, so they get her married off very young, and she has absolutely, or very rarely it is the boy, but it's the girl who is forced into a marriage. And I would say that that is one of the biggest reasons why Catholic marriages break down, is there is insufficient knowledge of what marriage entails. There's insufficient maturity to make an adult and free choice, and sometimes there is coercion also involved in Indian marriages, and this is what leads to marriages breaking down in the Catholic faith. But at the same time, in your discernment process, if you feel that there is something that is going to be a source of conflict in the marriage, don't let it slip. Have a conversation with the person about that thing that you feel would be a point of conflict, because if you have conflicts in the time of courtship, you can be sure they will only intensify when you do get married, because you have been yoked to each other in marriage. You are in it together, and in a way the person has a claim to you after marriage, and so all the negotiations, all the discernment should happen in the time before that. And that's why the church has a comprehensive program of marriage preparation. Unfortunately, some couples just go through it as one of the hurdles they need to go through in order to get married. But if you take that marriage preparation course seriously, you will get to know each other better, you will make a more informed decision, and you will be equipped for some of the conflicts that are coming up, and you'll have a strategy of how to cope with it.
One of the things that you really highlighted for us are some of the cautions or the red flags that can appear, especially at the time of courtship and dating, and before you finally seal this marriage. Now, in any marriage, whether it's between Catholics or interfaith, you wish the other person to be the best version of themselves, not someone who's made in your own image and likeness. Because this is a big aspect that some marriages are really crumbled under, because you want to make the other person to be another version of you. And it's therefore, with true freedom, one must enhance the best in the other rather than trying to make them a clone of yourself. This is extremely important. And you need to be aware of it, because sometimes what you might see as something so positive in your courtship will really be red flags. Because when you are courting, he or she is so possessive, and you think, wow, I'm the center of his world or her world. And he's got eyes or she's got eyes for nobody else but me. But once they're married, this develops into a kind of a jealousy, a possessiveness, touching into their own insecurities, that they won't even allow the partner to look or to talk to anyone else without coming down hard on them, as though the other person is not a person but an object or thing that they own and possess. But this was what was seen as something positive in the earlier stages. Now it just turns out to be something that is almost not life-giving but death-dealing. And in all these cases, when we are looking at red flags, one must always be aware of this word control. Because from control comes all forms of abuse. And this is as true for Catholics, but also marriages between Catholics, but interfaith. There can be physical abuse, and that is never acceptable. No matter how grave you might say the provocation is. But some people think it's their right. It's a total no-no and a warning sign. Sometimes it's emotional abuse, a constant putting down. Without me you'll be nothing. Sometimes in marriage later on it's financial abuse. You control who and how much the money is spent. Sometimes it could be sexual abuse within the marriage, because you'll make them want to do things that the other person is totally not comfortable with. And these are sensitive things we talk about simply because if we are not aware of it now, you bear the consequences later. So what we're really looking at is, what are the red flags? So don't dismiss and say, oh, it'll pass, it'll be. No, if it's a matter, have the courage to raise it up, address it, rather than get stuck into a relationship that can bring you not love, but a lot of pain and brokenness.
Other red flags are there. I don't know what would be red flags for the two of you if you were quoting somebody? Can't think of anything.
I would say emotional maturity would be something that I would expect in a person, but then
Which is actually a very, very, very important factor, because marriage is not for children. And if you are marrying a person who has not developed an adult maturity to understand things in their context, when to be serious, when to be playful, when to crack a joke, or when to take things seriously, you'll have serious problems in marriage. The kids are getting sick and bills are not paid, and they say, don't worry, we'll do it tomorrow, etc. Take it lackadaisically. That is a sign of immaturity. That's a very strong factor. And another thing is being too attached to your mom or your dad. You will be surprised at how many marriages are breaking today because the boy is too close to his mom and he cannot take a stand for his wife. Or the girl is so attached to her dad that she can't detach herself from him and attach herself to her husband. Marriage is a beautiful vocation. It is a call of God. At least in the Christian worldview, in the Catholic worldview, marriage is a calling. And God invites men and women to become selfless and self-giving through the reality of marriage. And so when you're discerning for a spouse, you must choose someone who challenges you to be a better version of yourself. I had this experience of a young couple I was accompanying, in which usually what is the prayer of a young person who is looking forward towards marriage? Lord, send me Mr. Right at the right time. Lord, send me Miss Right at the right time. Or if you've got your sights on one particular person, you'll be saying, Lord, if he is the one, give him to me. Lord, if she is the one, give her to me. That might be the thoughts that, or the prayers that go on in your heart and your mind. But in this case, the girl was saying, Lord, if I am meant for him, give me to him. It changes the paradigm. Marriage is supposed to make you move out of yourself and give to others. You must be the kind of man who can provide for his kids and protect your wife. You must be the kind of woman, without getting into stereotypes, but generally speaking, the woman who can be a caring and nurturing mother, someone who goes out of herself to think about others, to keep the family united in love. And so the question you need to ask yourself is, when you're discerning marriages, am I really marriage material yet? And before you take the step to get married, you must, of course, there are other red flags that I can think of, things that prevent men and women from maturing. A man with an addiction to pornography, for example, a big, big red flag. Girls, if you see a guy who's still having a porn addiction, when you're in courtship, run the other side 100 miles away as fast as you can. let him deal with it, let him overcome that addiction and prove himself to be a good man. Because if you can't have control over your sexuality, how will you be faithful? Right? The same thing for girls who, I think there is a kind of genre of literature called smut,
Yes.
right? Which is the female equivalent of pornography. So guys, if you see a girl who is addicted to smut reading, those are the kinds of novels that engage the female sexuality, run 100 miles the other way, right? Because these are worldly temptations that prevent men and women from maturing in the way that Christ desires them to, right? We were made by the Lord for freedom, and we are not called to submit to the yoke of slavery. And so for those of you who have that addiction right now, this is not a judgment for you, but this is to say, get some help, go for confession, get free from this bondage that is troubling you, because it's not going to fare well for your marriage. You might think, okay, I see these red flags in this person right now, but I'll sort him out, I'll sort her out after marriage. Don't get into a marriage with a person that you desire that person to be, but marry a person whom you can love as he or she is at the moment when you get married.
I just like to ask just one last red flag. Marriage is between two people. It's other-centered. But the danger is when you enter into marriage so selfishly, so egoistically, narcissist, because the narcissist is already married to one's own self, and the other person suffers. As one spouse said, I thought the name was right, but I realized the other partner was always right. and that's where self-centeredness, narcissism, and that's a major, major flag. Because they can only think of themselves in the marriage. I, myself, and me, not the partner, not the spouse.
Yeah. I can speak of this now. You might be wondering now, how can fathers speak about this? Because you've chosen to be celibate. But I can say that before I had entered into a discernment in order to become a priest, and I felt almost certain that my biggest dream was to find the love of my life and get married. So I can relate so much with that kind of a desire in every young person's heart. And one of the things that I realized in hindsight is in those early years, I used to think that I am the prize and that other person needs to match up to my standards. But I might be a real monster if I get married. If I had gotten married when I thought I was ready to get married, I might have made some foolish mistakes. And so now that's not to put the scare into everyone who, maybe you have a boyfriend, maybe you have a girlfriend, and you've got a wonderful relationship with each other. Don't desert your boyfriend or your girlfriend just because you're afraid of marriage. No, marriage is a beautiful calling, as I said, and when it works well, it's really beautiful. When you see like a 70-year-old man hugging his 65-year-old wife and saying, darling, honey bun, even after so many years of marriage, looking after little kiddies and then helping them to grow and mature, and each one of the children maturing into wonderful Christians and human beings. It is a real mission, and I have great admiration for married people today, all the more as a celibate, because their commitment to each other reminds me of how committed I must be to Christ and His church. Your marriage can really be a sacrament of God's presence in the world when it works well.
Now, Father, that we know what to avoid. So, what are the green flags? What should we look for in a right partner?
Maybe Father Jovi would like to go first.
Okay. Actually, you should be answering because you're the ones who are looking for the green flags, but based on my grey hair, let me say a few things. St. Thomas Aquinas said that something beautiful. Love is consistently willing the good of the other. So all those qualities in a person that are there, that will affirm, encourage, and as we said earlier, make us the best version of ourselves. What he insists is consistently willing the good of the other. So there you form as a great strength and your support to your partner, not as a rival, not as an opponent, not competing with each other, but on the same page, in the same boat. Sometimes it will be 50-50, sometimes it will be 40-60, sometimes it's 30-70. And some people are too straight-jacketed. Now, I did it today, you have to do it tomorrow. And when that enters into... But when the other is there, knowing that I have your back, knowing that I will be there for you, gives you a great sense that you're not in it alone. That is truly what a marriage, a union of minds and hearts and of the spirit. That's something beautiful. Green flags is the ability to appreciate the other and be grateful. Sometimes they say jokingly, the first 5 years he praises or she praises his partner, and the next 5 years they praise somebody else's partner or spouse. Let that never come to a stage where you take each other for granted. The ability to say sorry, or to say, I've goofed up, please forgive me. Sometimes a partner will always expect the other one to be saying sorry, but never ever say sorry. Or persons who thinks that everything revolves around themselves. When you see, in contrast to that, here's someone who's self-giving, going out of oneself, then you know these are green flags, because that relationship is on sound ground. And I think this marriage is not just for a day, but it's for a lifetime. A wedding is for a day, but a marriage is for a lifetime. And all these green flags that you must see, notice, cultivate and develop will be the sure, solid ground on which this marriage stands.
Yeah, I think I can't add anything much more to what you said, Father, but what I can do is probably say, how do you notice these things in other people? Observe when you go around with friends, especially when you see in one of them or a few of them potential life partners. See how they relate to their other friends. You know, they're usually, when you're in a mode of courtship, you put your best face forward. It's like a mask sometimes, and you don't see the real person. But observe the person in relation to others when you are together with them in a group. That's why to a certain level I discourage young people from becoming bound to a boyfriend or girlfriend very early on in life. I've encountered in pastoral situations sometimes one spouse or the other complaining that I was so immature, I made the wrong decision, I was too idealistic, and they bound themselves to a person too young, and then out of a sense of obligation they kind of had to stay the course because they didn't want to break that person's heart, but obligation is not a reason to get married, right? You should get married freely, joyfully, and it should be a fulfillment of a divine plan in your life that gives you joy, right? And so observe the person's behavior outside of context where they will be able to put on a mask. One of the also good places to notice a person's character is in the games field, right? That's what formators do in the seminary too. Because when you're fully into a game, you forget yourself, you forget that people are watching you, and your whole aim is to play a game, right? To win. Does this person try to win at all costs? You see? And that's another way to assess a character. Are they careless about their words? Do they make a promise today and then you find constantly again and again they fail to live up to their promises? Do they lie and manipulate? Do they cheat? Because marriages that are based on lies are never going to be strong. So a person who is truthful, a person who has a sense of justice and fair play, a person who thinks about others, think about observe how they relate to their own siblings. How do they care for their own parents? And then also ask yourself, am I doing those things that are supposed to be green flags too? So That's, I would say, our green flags. How to identify green flags.
So as long as people think they love each other, is faith irrelevant? Because I know of couple who come of different faiths, and they come to a conclusion that they won't be following any faith henceforth. So they just stick to values, morals, and ethics.
Right. Maybe Father Juvi will help me out on this. For me, I think that is de facto what many couples who are in interfaith relationships end up deciding, because that's the only way to maintain peace. And to a certain degree, I suppose they will raise their children as secular humanists with a kind of vague idea of morality, which is in some ways borrowed from their religious traditions. It might be, from an earthly point of view, a fair compromise. But for the Christian who takes what God has revealed to us through the scriptures, through Jesus Christ our Savior, for someone who takes that seriously, I don't think that's a good compromise. And marriage, if you think about it deeply, is not just, I would say, it is the deepest form of friendship between a man and a woman, or between two human beings. And if you can share with your spouse on the level of emotions, you can share with your partner in the marital embrace physically, or even in other forms of physical affection. You can share with your spouse on the intellectual level, but you can't share at the level of the spirit. There's something lacking there, right? And the one you want to marry is going to be not just really good and useful for you when they are strong, but you want someone when you are weak, when you are down, that someone who will pick you up and give you hope. Now, religion is a very strong source of hope, very strong source of meaning. And even when we go through difficult times, a failure, a loss, a death in the family, from where are you going to draw the sources of hope? Right? How are you going to communicate hope to your spouse who doesn't share your faith, or vice versa? Right? You'll give some psychological gyan maybe, but it won't touch the depth of the soul, right? And so if you're willing to compromise on that point, remember that you're not just going to stay together when you are young and good looking and you've got everything set up for you for your future, but you're also going to age together. You're going to be old and grey and wrinkled and toothless together. And so, what's going to give you hope when it comes to the evening of life? You see?
When you are baptized, and the word to be baptized is to be immersed into Christ. And therefore, I'd like to address particularly the Catholic partner. To be immersed into Christ not only makes you identify with Christ, it's Christ who envelops you with that love. And therefore, for the Catholic partner to make sure that the figure of Christ, the person of Christ, the living person of Christ is not isolated in that relationship. Because that becomes a source of grace and of strength, not just pious rituals that mean nothing. In fact, when Jesus wanted to speak about his love, he used the symbol of the marriage. He's the spouse and the church is the bride. Because he saw something in marriage so deep, so profound, that that love has to reflect the love that he has. And therefore, the love of a spouse draws its not just his inspiration, but also his strength. Because he promises, I will be with you all days, even to the end of time. And therefore, when this is a freely available resource that has come to us through our baptism, to diminish it or to just reduce it to the bare minimum is to lose out on a source that is so deep, so profound, just for the sake of superficial harmony so that it will not come in the way. Then you are missing out, or even, I use a strong word, selling out on something that is so deep and that should not be isolated. Sometimes I've met couples who entered initially into a marriage, trying to seek for the least common denominator. But as they've grown in their marriage, simultaneously with their faith, they've come to a deeper understanding. And no matter what the struggles in the marriage are, the strength from Jesus gives them help. And that is the force and power to overcome the storms in the relationship. So I would appeal to all those Catholics who are in an interfaith marriage to not give up on this marvelous resource, not as a pious, bigoted way, but something as I am come that you may have life and have life to the full, not only for you personally, but for your marriage and for your children as well.
That brings me back to the passage that I read to you from St. Paul in the beginning, where the believing husband, the believing wife might save the other. It's not as if that person becomes the source of salvation, but by uniting oneself deeply with Christ, one becomes Christ-like to one's spouse. And I'd like to conclude this part by sharing an experience of having met my old teacher from primary school or high school after many years, after I joined the seminary. And she came from another faith. She had been married to a Catholic man, and to my surprise, after so many, maybe decades of marriage to this man, she tells me that, Father, this man never once suggested that I should be converted. But when I saw how much of a dedicated, respectful, loving husband and father he has been to our family, I said, if Christ makes a person like that, then I must believe in him. And so I'm not ruling out the possibility that some people might truly come to know Christ even through an interfaith marriage. And the church doesn't want to set limits to how the Spirit may lead and how God's love may spread through the face of the earth. And so that's the value of the church's teaching and practice, that we make room for so many diversities of possibilities when it comes to marriage. But at the same time, the values are very clear. And and that's what we need to realize, that we have something so precious. There might be also difficult conversations to be had if you marry a person of another faith. For example, the church's teachings on contraception, on being pro-life, abortion, and divorce, all these are non-negotiables for Catholics. But when you are married to a person so intimately in relationship with that person, it will be very difficult to have a conversation about those things, right? So it's not irrelevant at all. In fact, it is so relevant that you better have very strong reasons why you're ignoring them.
Well, we often talk about, is that the right person for me? But we rarely see, am I the right person for them? How do we see this? And also, how much of the family's involvement is needed in our marriage?
We're really talking on a topic that we mentioned earlier, was this personal and emotional maturity. It's not only what expectations we have of the other, but what preparedness do I have of myself? So that's why when we talk about a remote preparation and an approximate preparation and an immediate preparation. The immediate preparation, I'm sure Father Sandeep will talk about what you need to do in terms of procedure. But the preparation that involves all these other elements, what we need, people are more concerned about getting the hall ready, getting the ceremonies ready, getting the dresses ready. But something more important, as we keep repeating, a wedding is for a day, but a marriage is for a lifetime. What other kinds of preparation? And that's where the family comes into the picture on two levels. On one level, the family is sometimes taken aback to find that you have entered into or going to enter into marriage with someone of another faith. And for a number of reasons. Out of concern, or maybe they were not informed well enough, or they were not prepared well enough, or they feel that they have failed in their duty as parents in this track. So there are many things, and we must handle that with gentleness, even though you have made your choice. But how do you do it? You have to do it with grace, because you ultimately, even if you do not get their agreement, at least their blessing. And it has to be navigated very carefully, because on one hand, while you are their children, now you are an adult child, and how do you make that choice? So whatever you do it in a way, don't suddenly unleash it as a shock and a surprise. Because what we are doing is not promoting an interfaith marriage. We are responding to a situation that has occurred, and how do we really navigate with those circumstances? Since you brought in the aspect about the family, I also want to talk about what an important role it has in shaping your understanding and your living out of the marriage. Because if the example of a marriage and a family is the one that you have lived in, for better or for worse, if you've seen in your home what respect is, dignity is, caring is, forgiving is, in all probability that's what you're going to bring into your marriage and expect of your spouse. If on the other hand, you've seen in your marriage violence, abusive behavior, long periods of silences, some of it grows on us even though we suffered from it. And unless we are very consciously tear that script so that that doesn't play out in our life or in your marriage. So these are different ways that we prepare well. That's the inner work to be done in these matters. So that you are going into a marriage already two people from two backgrounds, from two worlds, now coming into the same page, same home, same bed, same table. How are you going to work at unity and harmony? And so there's a lot of work to be done. Also, this is also the time to evaluate what role will this faith of mine sustain me, so that I am not in this alone. The grace of the Lord has to be with me, even if I am going to enter into an interfaith marriage. There are other also church procedures which Father Sandeep will lead us into.
Yes, I think before I go there, I wanted to also add to what you're saying about preparation for marriage. I think young people growing up also come with the baggage and the blessings of their parents' marriage. And that's where a certain level of awareness on the part of the parents that you are communicating a vision of marriage to your kids. The way that you relate to each other is either going to set your kids up for disillusionment with the institution of marriage, or they're going to say, I admire the way my parents love each other and I want to have a marriage just like them. Right? And so parents have a strong and powerful influence. We often say, like, seminarians have a long procedure to prepare themselves for marriage, but where do the young people who are preparing for marriage get their formation? It's from their families. And if you've had a parental marital relationship that's been troublesome, that's been filled with conflict, it doesn't mean that your marriage will also turn out the way that your parents did. And it won't happen automatically, but you need to go through certain therapies, certain processes, certain inner healing of those wounds where you saw, if this is what marriage is, I don't want it for me. You know, movements like Marriage Encounter, CFM, the Christian Family Movement, Missionary Families of Christ, a lot of their accompaniment of young couples and young people is to help them to come to a healing of their emotions, their memories, so that they can build their families on stronger foundations. And so that's what I wanted to emphasize, you know, that maybe as a young person who's witnessed maybe your parents divorcing or separated, or whether they were both Catholics, or they were in a mixed marriage or in a interfaith marriage, but you saw that they had a tumultuous time together, that need not be your faith. That need not be your destiny. But if you take the trouble to work on yourself, to speak to spiritual guides and mentors and work on yourself, you can build a very happy and healthy marriage. Matters of procedure that young people need to know is, very often I've had an experience in the parish, so I can speak from experience, that you'll have young couples coming maybe 1 month or 2 months in order to register their marriage. And there's not enough time. They must know that the church's procedures require your baptism certificates to be filed, some correspondence with the bishop and all that, which takes time. So don't, your interfaith marriage can never be an afterthought. You have to start the procedures at least 6 months before the day of your wedding. And so that means getting your baptism certificate, your confirmation certificate. Confirmation is an important sacrament. Catholics do not know that you cannot be married in the Catholic Church without confirmation. And so we'll have 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, 25-year-olds who have not been confirmed yet, and then they have to do a quick confirmation before getting married. Right? So if you haven't been confirmed, just double check and see whether you've got your confirmation certificate with you, or at least an entry in your baptism certificate that you were confirmed. Also, since you have to do a lot of running around, maybe your papers are not all in one place, maybe you were baptized in one place, you were confirmed in another place. So to reduce your tension and your worry with these procedural aspects, start well in advance. And then you'll have a much smoother, much more pleasant experience of interacting with the church than if you go and put pressure on your parish priest to do things the fast. And fast sometimes means careless, and there's not proper discernment. But if you do it well in time, you'll get to clarify your doubts, you'll get to get the instructions that you need and do everything on time, so that on your wedding you have a pleasant and joyful experience.
Speaking of procedures, different countries and states could have their own civic laws and regulations, right?
Yes, and for international marriages, usually it is not dealt with at the parish level, it is dealt with the diocesan level, and so there will be a communication between the dioceses of the two wedding partners. One more point to be made is that if you intend to marry a person out of the faith, be sure or double check that this person is not going to put obstacles to you to practice your faith first. Secondly, if you are taking the choice to marry a person outside the faith, as Father Juvie said, some traditions, by virtue of participating in the very rite of marriage in their tradition, you automatically become a member of that faith. So you need to register your marriage under the Special Marriages Act, and that helps you as a Catholic party to retain your faith when you marry someone outside the faith. So you need to explore all these details.
To summarize, no matter how uncomfortable the conversation is, please sit down and talk with your friends, family and your pastor, and discern with the Holy Mother Church. She always cares for you. At last, love is love, but love without faith is like Wi-Fi without internet. There's no connection.
A wedding is for a day and a marriage is for a lifetime, and therefore interfaith marriages is not something that has to be rushed into, but rather it is something that has to be sat down, discussed upon, and it has to be thing that has been taken after a lot of considerations, after a lot of discussions, and after a long procedure that the couple have to undergo. And
you're right, and it requires discernment, and so it's good to have a mentor who you can sit down and bounce off your ideas and feelings.
And remember, marriage is not a 3 years Netflix series, it is a lifelong covenant. So see you. This is Dennis signing off.
And this is Bertilla signing off from Heart Rock Cafe Season 2.
And if you like the video, share the video and subscribe to the Red Empress Media Center. And don't forget to hit the bell icon.
See you next time, where we have heartfelt conversations based on the solid rock of faith over a cup of
Coffee.